with the reliance on Copilot, on ChatGPT, all this good stuff, you put the message in you want to relay, it spits something out where you think, crumbs, that's really profound and beautifully written, and you spout that out to people and people think they've not written that. That doesn't sound like them.
Is the way that I'm looking, the way that I'm sounding, and the words that I'm using all aligned?
What do you want your audience to think? What do you want your audience to feel? And what do you want your audience to do as a result of reading or listening to the message?
Hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Every Day with me, Martin, and in Ben. Ben, so what's the topic of conversation today?
It's actually a topic sent in by someone listening in. Angela, thanks for sending this in. Angela said to us, I'm going to read this word for word actually, because it's a great point. Angela says, I'd love your views, not a question, but your views on ensuring communications truly land, and they land consistently across teams of busy people. So as soon as we had that from Angela, we thought, yeah, we're definitely going to talk about this one. Can I go first with this bit? Yeah. I've got an idea. The first thing that comes to mind with that, Angela, ensuring communications land and are consistent, is planning it out. Now, you're speaking with a guy, I dare say two guys here, that have a little bit of an allergy to planning. I don't like it, I hate it. I've talked about it before, it bores me, but I get the value, and every time I do it, I'm glad that I did. And with communication, I feel it's no different. So when we say plan it out, I'm going to get your view on what this looks like for you in a second, Martin, but for me, it's planning it out. It's thinking, what do I want this piece of communication, what do I want this message, whatever it might be, to cause? And there was a bit of learning that we did in an organisation a couple of years back, talking about written communications. And the planning aspect of that involved thinking about three things. What do you want your audience to think? What do you want your audience to feel? And what do you want your audience to do as a result of reading or listening to the message? And I love that. I think it's really important we don't get confused by thinking, right, I'm going to tell you what to think, I'm going to tell you what to feel and tell you what to do. It's more of a,
No, I love that.
what is it you want your communication to cause in those three in those three topics? How about you?
I'm always, whenever I think about planning and I get that little nudgy, I always think about one of my favourite television shows, which was Grand Designs.
Yeah.
And one of the most famous shows, and if you've worked with Ben and I, you might have heard us use this example before, but I'm not going to apologise for sharing it again because I think it's brilliant. In Grand Designs, if you don't know the TV show in the UK, Grand Designs, it's about self-building. Mm-hmm. And this couple, years ago, were going to get a German hoof house, which is a kit house built in the woods.
Beautiful things, triangle roofs, they look gorgeous, I think, yeah.
But the German house building example, and Kevin MacLeod was talking about this, was very different to the British house building way of doing it at the time. That might have changed. And what the Germans Hoof House did is they planned everything out beforehand. So the couple went over to Germany, picked the colour schemes, picked where all the plugs were, picked everything. So everything was planned out. And actually they spent more time planning than they spent building. So the German house building example, and give us a little bit of leeway here. They typically spent 40% of their time planning, 30% of their time building, with 30% of time for contingency.
See, I already now think about that from the British approach to building.
and at the time, the difference was 5% time planning, 95% time building with no contingency time.
And then you get the delays, the mistakes, budgets, all that stuff go out the window. Yeah, okay.
And what the German house builders did is they planned for things to go wrong. So they had contingency plans in place. So watch the episode. I won't go into it loads now, but it's a classic. Hoof House, Grand Designs. If you Google it, I'm sure it will come up. It's amazing. But then I think about communications and I think about how I've communicated in the past. Have I really thought about it? And what do I want people to know, feel and do? Possibly not. I've just launched into it. I've got this thing to say, I'm going to say it. And that's always had a bit of an impact on how that message has been received. So almost going, I love that as almost like as a bit of a framework. What do I want people to know? What do I want people to feel? And what do I want people to do? And then structuring my communication around that. I would go, that's definitely something I'm going to take forward and really think about, especially as I'm doing quite a lot of panel speaking and public speaking at the moment. That's really good. That's really good. And then then the next bit of it is what's that communication? Why am I doing it? Why am I doing it? And how am I going to communicate it? Because there's loads of different ways, which I'm sure we're going to explore in a little bit more detail.
The how's a big one, isn't it? Is this going to be a phone thing, an email thing, a letter? Do I fax it? Maybe not these days. Yeah, okay, I get that. And with the what, the why, the how, I wonder, not just from a planning point of view, but actually including that in the message that you give. And you've said you want to ensure communications land. I just wonder if you've looked at work with Simon Sinek in the past, all that kind of good stuff, the power of why, how powerful it is to include in the message, why is this thing happening? Say if, for example, it was change. I know that's not the actual question, but why is the change happening? How is that change going to happen? What things could people expect? Almost like a contracting piece. What should people be aware of, be expecting to happen? What is not going to happen? What are you not going to promise to commit to doing? Maybe that's also important to include.
Yeah, 100%. And you just sparked something in my head, something that we've just seen in our last corporate roles, which I wasn't sure about at the time, but actually I found quite reassuring. Our big boss at the time, when we were going through a period of changing some stuff and changing the operating model, he was really clear of, and he kept reiterating it, which almost gave me a sense of comfort, going, we actually don't know all the answers yet. We're learning. We're almost learning as we're doing. So there wasn't a case of getting it right and wrong. It was almost giving us all that clarity and certainty and safety that, you know what, things might go wrong, but that's okay because learning is the answer. That as a message I personally found really powerful. Interestingly, I know not everybody found it powerful, which might lead us to thinking about something which I know you're really passionate about later.
What, we don't have all the answers. Well, why are you doing it in the first place? That kind of. But yeah, I can imagine that hearing that probably earned them a bit of a license or a bit of a right to say, no, I said we don't have all of the answers yet, Okay.
And as long as we have some of the answers and it's not just and he was very clever with how he did it. So it wasn't like that's my default phrase. It was almost like, and it wasn't an excuse. It was like, well, no, remember we said we don't have all the answers, but here are the things that we do know.
I suppose something that's quite important if you find yourself in that position, you want to communicate something, you don't have all the answers, you don't want to have all the answers, you want to give the team some play and license in this, right? Is maybe try and communicate, if you have any rules of engagement to hand, communicate what those actually are, right? I don't have the answers to the what, but how we're going to work, this is what's in scope. This is where we don't want to be playing, but here's where we want to be working in, folks. To give people, you can't give clarity on exactly what the thing is, but you can offer a bit of certainty on how we're expected to work during this uncertain time.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think the next thing that we'd probably say, Angela, is about congruency. So if I'm communicating, and if you think, bit of a drop here, but if you think about the work of Alfred Maharabian, he talked about the way people communicate, which is visual, vocal, and verbal.
Yes.
Yeah. So in terms of our how we receive information, we receive it visually. So we've got to be congruent in the message that we're sending. So is the way that I'm looking, the way that I'm sounding, and the words that I'm using all aligned? And there have been so many occasions where, you see a mismatch of congruency. So I'll give you an example. I remember hearing about in an organisation that I was doing some third-party work for, an HR director was talking about how passionate they were about their new vision, but reading it off a cue card. And you could almost see the audience in their subconscious mind going, but you don't believe this. And then some of the best communicators of messages, even if they're difficult ones, doing it with that visual, vocal and verbal, those elements all being massively aligned. And that always will strengthen the message.
I wonder if there's an increased risk of this going wrong with what we're seeing these days, with the reliance on Copilot, on ChatGPT, all this good stuff. You put the message in you want to relay, it spits something out that you think, crumbs, that's really profound and beautifully written, and you spout that out to people and people think they've not written that. That doesn't sound like them. I know what Angela sounds like. That doesn't sound like Angela. Not saying Angela, you would do that, of course. But again, back to a real example. I've seen that in the past where it was an email communication about a change or a reason for a restructure written by someone who was a senior leader but was really personable. And she made a point of making sure that her voice was heard, she was present, she was well renowned and loved in the team. And the message came through, evidently written by probably a communications team or something, right? But it lacked her personality. And it was almost the subject of the conversation within the team wasn't the thing that was being announced. It was that announcement didn't feel or sound like her.
Yeah, that level of authenticity, and we talk about authentic leadership, but that authenticity and owning the message is so powerful.
Yeah, okay. So congruence is big. I wonder if there's something else about making who you hear it from. Who you hear it from. There's been times, I know you've got a couple of examples of this, but there's been times when I've heard things on the grapevine and that's not landed particularly well with me, or I've heard a rumour about it. Oh, there's a change coming, they'll pick up with you, I can't tell you much more. So you're telling me a little bit about it, but I'm not privy to all of it. And then all I can do naturally is awfulize. Oh, what's that thing going to be?
That phrase, awfulize, I'm nicking that.
You do, it's the worst case scenario, right? It's like when someone says, it's like when the wife texts me, we need to talk. I'm thinking, wow, well, this is going to be really bad, but we have loaded the dishwasher incorrectly. So, yeah, I guess it's making sure everyone, to a degree, has access to that message firsthand from you, from the leader. And then when they've had it message firsthand from the leader, it's then kept alive. It ticks over. It's constantly reinforced. And that might not be a bringing everyone back together in a conference again or a group email again. It might just be constantly referenced in one-to-ones and conversations in the future.
100%.
I know you've got a good example of this.
Yeah, I've seen it done incredibly powerfully. And I know Ben and I often talk about when it hasn't gone so well, but this was an example of when I thought it was done beautifully, especially at the outset. So I was working in a large corporate organisation and we were going through what can only be described as transformational change. So the organisation was fundamentally changing its operating model.
Cue a lot of people listening thinking, oh yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and it was, there was restructuring.
Yeah.
We were closing sites in the UK and outsourcing some of that work to India. And the thing that the exec team at the time did is they went to every site in the UK and personally delivered the message. So no video, they got up on stage and personally and directly delivered the message, even though it wasn't a message that people wanted to hear. The one thing that I'm almost certain that it did, because I was one of the people that was traveling around with them a little bit, was it avoided the drungle jums. So everybody heard that message firsthand. So the managing director, the chief operating officer, and the chief financial officer, the HR director, they knew exactly what the message that everybody received the same message. Now, people might take that message on board differently because you can't, but they know that everybody has received the same message. So for me, that was a massive bit about providing people with that clarity and certainty.
And even if they have taken a different view of it, when they talk about it, as they probably will afterwards amongst each other, they can say, oh, I don't know if I heard it that way. Here's my interpretation of it. Yeah, I get that.
And what they also did brilliantly, and you sparked something in my head, was they did the what, the why, and the how.
Nice.
And I still remember, it was in 2006, the managing director going, if we don't make these changes, we will not have a business. That's why we're doing it. They talked about what they were doing, but the big thing said, if we don't make these changes in the next 2 years, we will not have a license to operate. We will not have a business. And it was almost like, I've heard some bad news, but I understand why.
Yeah.
Now, the mistake that I think that we made, and it's a collective we as a leadership team, is we did a bit of, and we'll probably talk about this in another pod when we talk about change, is we communicated the message, and then we've communicated the message. We didn't do what you've just been talking about, is reinforcing it and almost doing that next bit and going, so you've heard the message, what's your understanding of it? How does that affect you? Just one and done's never going to work.
But that's it sometimes feels easier to do a once and done, because particularly if it's a less popular message or one that's going to involve people changing something, I wonder how often is it the case that we'll steer away from that or verge away, because that's an uncomfortable chat. I don't want to provoke it. I'm having a really good, pleasant one-to-one conversation,
But it goes back to something that I know we've already talked about in a previous pod about courage. And it's treating people as they need to be treated. So it's that courage of and I saw that on stage that day, and I was like, over that week, and I was like, wow, because I probably expected it to be communicated by email, and it wasn't. It was communicated face to face in front of everybody.
So there's two things there. It just flashed up for me. What about the way that was communicated? And then the second thing is treat people as individuals. So maybe we could talk about that. First, the way it's done. I wonder if that was sent out as a group email across the whole organisation with those same words, almost like a transcript of what they said. I wonder if that would have landed in the same way with the team.
Interesting you say that. They did exactly that after they communicated the message.
Right.
So that some people could do that double check going, is my understanding of it?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So I can go back and revisit it. They literally recorded it and sent it out to people so they could play it back again with the transcript.
That brings us back to one thing that we often share with our clients, a little tidbit, which is some things are better said than read. Oh. That is absolutely a prime example of that being the case. It doesn't mean that you don't send anything written, of course, but the thing that needs to come first is hearing it from the person, from the people. Oh, that makes good sense.
And then matching that with the congruency of the message, it's going to have more impact. One of the things that, it goes back to that, there's something that we talk about, especially when we're talking about change or delivering messages or communication, it's communicate. And it's only when people are like going, look, shut up, I get it. That's when you've communicated enough. Before then, they've got all of that stuff going on in their head going, yeah, no, that might not be right. So you almost need to make sure that is that level of communication so people have that clarity and certainty. It's completely embedded.
So you're saying that a symptom of when and says here, how to make sure they truly land, a symptom of it having truly landed is when people say, we know, we've heard it, will you shut up? I'm sick of getting this.
Yeah.
That seems a little bit counterintuitive though, doesn't it? You're almost you're not aiming to hack people off, but if you do it well, they'll be sick of hearing it.
Yeah. But you made a really good point about following it up in one-to-one. So, what are you thinking after that bit of communication? How are you feeling? So again, that's something we talked about before. Then you're talking about it with your leadership hat on. You're almost doing the communication with your leadership hat on rather than your management hat. Then you're going to the people going, so how do you feel about that? Where's your head at? What are you thinking?
So it's a multifaceted approach. You're not just sending this out by an email and then the next week send another one, just checking you've heard it, and the next month still checking you've heard it. It's how do we
100%.
change the method, the medium in which people are hearing the same message? That makes a lot of sense. And that's important for some people, right? Back to a point you made earlier, treat people like individuals. Golden rule, treat people as they need to be treated. As practitioners of insights, MBTI, Spotlight, DISC, all that kind of good stuff, we know some people like to receive messages and read messages, audibly, some people verbally, some people written.
And you're right, and you need to cover all those bases.
And not just the style of how it's delivered, but the content of that as well.
Yeah.
People would want to read about, what's the impact on the people? Other people might think, well, what's the impact on the business? What's the bottom line? How does it affect me? Others might be thinking, well, what are the steps? What are the analytics? What's the data that supports this decision? So it's thinking about not making them so generic and perfectly polished that they meet every single person's preferences, but just do enough so that you're thinking, if someone's leading with a blue preference, to quote Insights, what might that message look and sound like, and how would that differ to if I'm sending it to someone like me who leads with yellow?
And that's another link into leadership hat on, flexibility. Going, how do I flex my style and approach, or make sure all those bases are covered? So I know that I have my strengths and I have my development areas, and some of those development areas are really big and deep. Don't laugh. But then I'll go to somebody else, probably not Ben, because we're too similar like that, but I'll go to somebody else and go, hey, Christine, can you read this for me? Can you tell me what you think and what you get? And Christine, great colleague of ours, would always go, no, you need to do this, or you've missed a bit out. And it wouldn't naturally come to me, but she's helping me, by the same token, develop by going, no, you need to say this. That didn't land quite right, Martin, because you've done this. And I'm like, oh, man. But it would have landed with me, but I haven't thought enough about the other people.
So I'm smiling because the amount of times that I've written an email and I said to my missus, babe, can you just check over that? And it's really poor instruction from me. I'm not asking her to check over how it's written. I'm asking her just to spot any spelling mistakes that haven't been picked up, right? But she'll come back and she'll say, I don't get what you're saying. I'm like, how can that be more clear?
Yeah.
Because it's a very different preference to me. So that's a great suggestion.
That goes back to planning it out. So all of that stuff that you're doing, that's before you communicate it. So almost if you can, and this is something that I'm trying to do, go before you press send, especially if you're communicating by email, have you spent enough planning? Have you got someone to proofread it? Not just for spelling mistakes and grammar, but does it pass the make sense test? If I was reading that as a different preference, how would I get it?
What a great opportunity as well to build a relationship with someone in the team, a team member who might not be the go-to person you normally lean on for that stuff, right? In fact, maybe there's another idea there. When you're thinking of this communication, this thing you're going to send out, who are the people or who's the person who you feel is your biggest opponent? Who would present the biggest challenge? Who's the person you're really, really worried about presenting this to as you're forming it? And then use them as a litmus test.
Yeah, love that idea. Especially if it's something that you don't have to communicate to everybody at the same. Do you know what I mean? It's that balance between, is it
it's not
confidential?
Yeah,
it's just, exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing that pops into my head is, and this is something that lots of organisations are asking us about, and I know in our previous organisation there was loads of work on it. In communication, don't underestimate the power of storytelling.
Ooh, yeah. Okay. Now I know you're passionate about storytelling. Tell us more.
Well, it's, I'm borrowing or stealing with pride, as we used to say. An insight that I got from a colleague of ours a few years ago is think about when stories were the most relevant to you as a kid. You sat there, you listened, you created visions and stuff in your own head. Yeah. So you get someone to immerse themselves in it by the power of storytelling. And we always say, don't make yourself the hero of your own story. So if you're doing stories to talk about something, make it about somebody else. If it's a personal success that you've had, use a bit of poetic license and make it about somebody else. I still remember, and I'm sure it'll be on YouTube somewhere, about the chief executive of, I think it was T-Mobile, and he used a storytelling analogy to describe where they were at, going, people, we are on a burning platform.
Yes.
And I still have pictures in my head of an oil platform burning. And I know that wasn't the platform he was referring to, but that visual imagery and that storytelling, if we don't do this, yeah, my old managing director, we're talking about that big change thing, he was talking about if we don't do this, we won't have a business. But then he also said, I'll do everything I can to help you. I know this is really difficult. I've been in times where I found it really difficult. I didn't know how to get through. So if you need us, that's what we're here for. Again, really powerful. Don't underestimate the power of people engaging with a really great story or anecdote.
I mean, that can be quite, I'm just thinking, if I was going to communicate something, I'd be thinking, where do I start with that? How do I write a story that doesn't feel like, all right, folks, let's sit down. Once upon a time, how do I make that business related? How do I make that authentic? I'm not a writer. How do I know if it's going to hit the mark or not?
I go back to what you said before, which is, right, so plan it out. Don't underestimate that planning bit. So what do you want people to know? What do you want people to feel? What do you want people to do?
Yeah, okay.
So actually, if that's intrinsically part of the story and I can weave that in, that's a really good starting point. If it's something that you know that loads of people can relate to, so it's a third party example that everyone will understand. So for example, I remember somebody talking brilliantly about change and adaptability, and they talked about Blockbuster Video. Because everybody knows of a certain age, my daughter won't know who the heck Blockbuster Video were, but they had the opportunity to change, but they went no. And now Blockbuster doesn't exist. And everyone can relate to that. So it's almost, right, okay, I can understand the connection, and that makes the message easier to assimilate.
I get it. I get there's something that I'm actually really proud of this. From a few years back, I was running some sessions on feedback in an organisation, and one of the stories that I told about this within the session was about when I had some feedback about being a bit game show hosty, and years later, someone wrote to me, give me a bit of feedback or give me a testimonial, whatever it was on LinkedIn perhaps, and said, oh, and by the way, you're totally not a game show host. And I thought, wow, that stuck with them for 2.5 years, maybe 3 years. I don't know how much of the rest of the content did, but that certainly landed.
But that's the humility story, which is a brilliant way of anchoring the message.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate the power of storytelling.
I hope this is helpful. We're kind of rattling through a couple of ideas that and it was a great topic. And as soon as you said it, we put our pen to paper and thought, that's a really good challenge, actually. What would we touch on? I've got a final few maybe thoughts to share here. I don't know if you've got another one to add to the list. The final one for me was owning the message. So I've been in a position, I'm sure many people out there have, where a message has been cascaded. You are told to share this message with your team. And therefore you might be thinking, well, these aren't my words. I disagree with the message. I disagree with the action. I don't want to do this thing. But you're paid to do that. The biggest thing that I've seen someone made the mistake of in the past was saying, listen, folks, this isn't me. I disagree completely with this, but I'm being told that I've got to let you know. And I get why they said it, because I guess in their head they were thinking, this makes me authentic. This is my real view. But actually what it did was, what's the word? It took away the not the importance of the message, but it undermined the message. It wasn't as credible, perhaps. If they have said, listen, I have a view on this, and my view might differ from what the course of action is, but we need to get behind this and rally because that's what we're paid to do, that they would have gained more respect.
Yeah.
So you can still disagree with it, but show alignment with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
How about you? What's
Yeah, no, you know, the more we think about it, I'm sure there's more stuff that we could put in. Maybe it's a case of going, hopefully, like you said, that's given not just Angela, but other people a few ideas. Maybe now it's a case of going, right, so let's take that away, see how that works for you. Is there something in there that you would like to try? Like we always say, we're going to share our thoughts, views, based on our experience. That doesn't necessarily make us right, and we're not the fonts of all knowledge. But I think that's a really good starting point.
not bad, this is it? I wouldn't suggest you go away and try and put all of that into play all at once for every message. You should just pick out the bits that work for you at the right time.
I'm going to leave you with one of my favourites, and there's a slight different words. Proper preparation and planning prevents pathetically poor performance.
I like the way you tweaked
right?
that, didn't you?
Yeah, proper preparation and planning prevents pathetically poor performance. Cool. So almost, you're right. Ben's favourite phrase, start with the end in mind. What do you want people to know, feel and do, and work backwards from there.
Lovely. Yeah, good. Listen, I think we'll leave it there for today, right? We really do hope that you found that interesting, helpful. It would be brilliant to see or to hear from a couple of people out there as well. If you're listening to this, Angela, thanks so much for the inspiration. If you're sat there thinking, I'd love to hear these guys' view on this thing, or what's their experience of X, Y, Z, you can just go down onto Spotify, Apple, scroll down to just above episodes and press text the show, and you'll get right through to us with your suggestions and topics. But that's all from us for today, folks. Thanks for listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Bye.